The aim of every press conference is to learn something you didn't know already. Now, we didn't learn why we're here on Thursday rather than a Friday. We might find out about that later. But we did learn that Liverpool have got a problem when it comes to right back. All three of their right back options, none of them are fully fit ahead of the game against Newcastle. We'll have to wait and see exactly who will be starting in that particular role. Now that brings in another question about squad depth, and we got into that with Arne Slot. He did not surprise us with his answers, but he did give us some interesting nuggets to dissect, and we will be doing exactly that back in the lab. And here we are in the lab, recording this just after 5 o'clock, which feels a little bit strange, I'm not going to lie, particularly considering we are so far away from the game about which we're talking. But we don't know officially why Arne Slot decided he wanted to do this on Thursday rather than Friday and cost himself a £5,000 fine, by the way. But normally what happens when Liverpool are doing a press conference a day earlier than normal is because the next day is a day off. And when you consider that there's going to be 10 days between the Bournemouth game and the game against Newcastle, it's not unsurprising that he's decided to give his players a day off, particularly in light of the injury news, which was the big bomb that dropped in today's press conference. Unfortunately, Jeremie Frimpong, who was removed in the game against Bournemouth, he has suffered a hamstring issue and he will be out until at least the international break, which sounds bad, sounds terrible, but it's actually less than 2 weeks. So the hope is that they got him off early enough that it didn't turn into a big problem. But when Conor Bradley, who's the other right back, is still unfit and Joe Gomez is not quite ready to play 90 minutes as yet, then it is kind of an issue. And we will get into that once we get to my top takeaways of how big of an issue it is and what it means for the rest of the way that Liverpool like to do things. But it was a kind of thing that we could have all done without. It was a real shame for obviously Jeremy, who had looked fantastic in the 2 games we've seen for him so far. But we'll have to wait and see exactly what that means for who plays in that right back position. There was no news on Isak. I mean, this is probably the only place where you can guarantee there's not going to be any new Isak quotes, is a press conference with Arne Slot, because as much as Vinny O'Connor and Sky will demand those questions are asked, Arne Slot will keep batting them away like he's Babe Ruth on the mound, smashing them to here, there and everywhere. So yes, no Isak news, no Gahey news, no general transfer news at all. But there was still plenty to go on. And as I mentioned, one of them is going to be the injury thing. So let's get into the top takeaways. Top takeaway number 1, you can't build a squad for the worst case scenario. Now, in the light of this news around the right back situation and the fact that it's likely to be either Endo or Dom Szoboszlai or maybe even Curtis Jones is going to spend some time at right back against Newcastle. As I said, Joe Gomez hasn't been able to train completely. Slot said he's missed some days of training, which is natural considering how long he's been out for. He's still coming back and he did train today, but it sounded unlikely that he'll be fit and ready to go for 90 minutes. So whether he goes from the start and then Slot tries to find a solution at the end, or whether or not he goes for the solution at the beginning and then tries to bring Joe on to see it home, we'll have to wait and see. But all of this conversation has got people talking about squad depth, and it's something I've seen quite a lot of in recent days. The idea that Liverpool are leaving themselves short, the squad is thin, and I think some of what Mo Salah said after the PFA Awards, where he was asked, is this team better than last season's team? And he said no. A lot of people are taking that as him admitting the fact that we are light and we are thin, etc., rather than the fact that what he actually meant was this team are still new. And the last team had a whole year together, had more than a year together, because there was no transfers last summer. So they were able to build on those connections and those chemistries, and that's helped them win the league. So this team is still at the beginning. He didn't say they couldn't be as good. He just said that right now they're not. Anyway, so squad depth. How many players do you need? How much can you plan for the worst case scenario? I think the first thing you have to acknowledge is the fact that for all of the transfers in and outs, Liverpool have lost 6 players from the first team squad from last season. That is Diaz, Nunes, Jota, Quansah, Trent and Kelleher. Liverpool have brought in 6 players who are going to be in the first team squad. So that's Mamardashvili, Kirkes, Leone, Frimpong, Wirtz and Ekitike. 6 out, 6 in. Doesn't sound that thin to me. The other thing that you heard Slot say is that most teams want 2 players for every position, which is standard practice these days. But if he was going to lean on one side, he'd rather have less than more. And the reason for this, and it's something that he isn't alone as a manager is saying, is that it's very hard when you've got lots of players who are in and around the team and the first team who aren't playing football. It's not great for chemistry. And I think this is one of those fundamental things that's very different inside football to outside football. And what I mean by this is that coaches, players, even agents, they all understand how important, how delicate that chemistry is, that hothouse that you have in a football team, and keeping everybody motivated, keeping everyone involved is such an important part to becoming a winning unit. Whereas from my outside, a lot of time, fans, pundits, journalists can just be like, well, you need more players. Just have more players, just have a deeper squad. If something goes wrong, you've got someone else to bring in. And I think when you see the way that teams like Chelsea go about things, it's easy to believe that, well, if they can do it, then why aren't everyone doing it? Well, you don't need me to tell you that Chelsea do things differently to everybody else. And regardless of all of that, if you look at the right-back situation, Liverpool have 3 right-backs. So rather than 2 for every position, they have 3 for that position. But it just so happens that none of that 3 are at full fitness. Now you can look at it and say, that's extremely unlucky to have all 3 of them not at 100% fitness. There will be some people who say, well, considering one of them's Joe Gomez and another one's Conor Bradley, who have both had fitness issues, maybe it's not so surprising. But I still believe that Arne Slot is of the mind that he cannot plan for the worst case scenario, and he won't do it in every single position. I think having the youngster that is Leone will allow him to maybe go into a season with 5 centre-backs where previously he wouldn't. I would still expect to see more members of the squad in the attacking variety. You know what I'm talking about. But for the most part, I think the idea that fans and that people on the outside have of, we are light, we need more players, we need more players. You can only register so many players. And you want to be able to have versatility within those guys. And I think that's what Liverpool are going to aim for. So as much as some people may be fearful, and this will be almost like a realization of those fears, or kind of like, I told you so, this is why we need more players. I don't think Arne Slot agrees with you. Top takeaway number 2, there are no subliminal messages in Arne Slot's press conferences. Now, Beth Lindop asked him if he thought that he'd have a busy end to the transfer window, which is kind of another follow-on from the squad depth question. And Arne Slot said no. If I said that I thought there would be a busy end, it would mean that I was unhappy with my squad. And I'm very happy with my squad, which is the only thing you're ever going to hear Arne Slot say. Now, we've seen plenty of managers take a different tack over the course of this transfer window. David Moyes has been very open, talking about he needs 10 or 12 players in. And I mean, obviously they had 13 or so out of contracts at the end of last season, so that might be a special case. But even today, Enzo Maresca has spoken about how Nicholas Jackson and Kunku aren't going to be with the squad because they need solutions. And we've seen plenty of managers be open about the fact that they're looking to buy more players. They need to bring in more players. Nuno Espirito Santo last week of Forest said he was very unhappy with the way that they'd done their business. And within 48 hours, they bought 4 players. You won't be hearing any of that stuff from Arne Slot. If Arne Slot feels like the squad needs something, he's going to tell it to Richard Hughes. He's not going to be telling it to us. And I can't say I'm massively surprised about this. This is all fed into the way that he likes to motivate his players, or should I say, he doesn't want to demotivate his players. And this is something I feel like is a really important point, because not every manager does it this way, as I've just mentioned. Some of them do feel like they can be a bit more open with what they don't like, whereas Arne Slot's very much been like, well, no, these guys have got me to where I am. And we have to remember, the guys in this squad have been predominantly responsible for a league title, so he doesn't really feel like he needs to throw them out. But that's not to say that there won't be busyness between now and the end of the window, just because he said it to us. And let's not forget, he is very much a straight-talking man. I'm not accusing him of lying. What I am saying is that the press conference, the public sphere, is not the place where he makes those comments. The place where he makes those comments is behind closed doors. So we might well hear of more ins and more likely to be more outs from this Liverpool squad, but you'd never know it until it's happened. Top takeaway number 3, has Chiesa finally earned Slot's trust? Now, Slot was asked about Chiesa and the wonderful moment he had against Bournemouth on Friday night, and Slot was very pleased for him. He said that he's now fully fit, working hard, and he was starting to reap the rewards as a club. And when asked about his potential moves away, obviously he's been someone who at the beginning of the summer, it was almost a given that he'd be leaving. He didn't go on that pre-season tour to Asia, for example. But now when you listen to Slot, he's basically saying, well, if he keeps doing that, then there's no reason for me to stay him. He's doing his chance of staying, no harm whatsoever. I needed him, I called for him, he came and he delivered. Keep doing that and you're golden. And to be honest, we've mentioned how much of a straight talking man Slot is. I tend to believe him. Now, we know that there's been, let's call them complications in terms of fortifying the attacking numbers over the course of this transfer window. And maybe that has something to do with the use of Chiesa now. I mean, Slot did mention the fact his only other option in attacking areas was Rio Ngamoa, who's done well, but is still a 16-year-old. Some people, by the way, saw that as the kind of thing that I said he doesn't do, but I decided to think of that more as a praise of Chiesa rather than a nudge in the ribs about their attacking options. But whatever it was, what it amounted to is the fact that Slot decided, unlike in the Community Shield, Liverpool need a goal, that guy's on the bench, he can help us score a goal. And you know what? That's exactly what he did. Now, it feels to me as though Chiesa now wants to stay. There's been rumours in the last 24 hours that Bayern were looking at trying to get him on loan. And Chiesa, as well as the club, have rebuffed those advances. And maybe it looks like he's now ready to attack the Premier League in a way that he really couldn't last season. And I hope that's the case. I really do. I think, aside from what you think about him as a man, this is a very, very talented player at his best. And as much as it looked like that talented player had gone for the most part of last season, maybe it really did just take a whole year of getting him to recover from his injury issues, get used to what it's like to play Premier League. Let's not forget, there's 2 domestic cups here in England. You don't get that in Italy. The Champions League was longer now than there's ever been, so he had to adapt to that. There's more games, more intensity. Maybe he's now ready. And look, if he can continue to do what he did previously, I think he'll be a fantastic addition to the squad. Who knows? Maybe he will still end up leaving before the end of the window and it'll make us all look stupid. But you know what? If it's 84 minutes gone and Liverpool need a goal up at St James's Park, do not be surprised to see number 14 entering the fray. And now it's time for me to hear from Arne Slot when he answers my questions about training and how much time on the training pitch they've had and how much they need.
Hi Arne, you've spoken previously about the difficulty of changing so many players in the starting 11 and perhaps the influence that's maybe had on some of the defensive structures. It's rare to have 10 days between games in the Premier League, even at this stage of the season. How helpful has that been to be able to get more time with the players on the training pitch and maybe kind of drill some of the structures a little bit more?
No, of course it's helpful, but we did have a good pre-season. We had 6 weeks compared to last season where we only had 2. Yeah, we had 6 weeks as well, but only 2 with most of the players. So we've had our time to train already, and I think that's also what you could see against the Bournemouth game, because it was, if you look at data, running stats, it was the most intense game that is played in the weekend. So that tells you that our match fitness is where we want it to be, and where we need it to be if you need to go to Newcastle, by the way. But it's also clear that in pre-season, that's what I said, I mixed up lineups, and then it's quite normal that you don't see every time the right connection between some players or some lines. But that was already very good against Bilbao and okay to good against Palace and Bournemouth.
Another thing about having new players in, I noticed that against Bournemouth and in fact then the second goal against Crystal Palace, they all came after double substitutions in quite soon after making double changes. So is maybe getting used to the reorganising and getting used to some of the demands for those new players, is that maybe going to eradicate some of those issues as well?
Now, most changes I've made in a game are due to match fitness, and players were not available in whole pre-season. So Hugo Ekitike, for example, that I took off twice, needs to make a step from Bundesliga to Premier League, and missed out a part of pre-season. So, and you want to keep him fit for the upcoming games, weeks, months as well. It's the same with McAllister, who was not able to start, in my opinion, yet against Palace. But I think he needed playing time. It's the same why I started him against Bournemouth. Was he already on the top of his level? No. But to get there, he needs playing time. So I had to take him off. Now, I just spoke about Jeremie, who comes from a different league. And so, yeah, you need to take this into account, although that's sometimes difficult for a fan or a pundit, because they're like, you need to win this game. Yeah, we need to win this game, but we need to keep them fit for the rest of the season as well. And we do have players on the bench that are equal to the ones that start. So then you need to use your squad. So I see it as a coincidence that we've conceded our goals after the substitutions. But time will tell if I'm right or wrong. But on the other hand, we also scored a goal after a substitution. 2, by the way, from Federico and Mo.
Last one for Carl.
This is another one of those times where it's fascinating to see exactly which part of what I've said Slot decides to zero in on and why. Now, when I asked about the extra time on the training pitch, it was more talking about the new boys bedding in, because I had heard Slot say about how much the starting 11 had changed in response to some of the criticisms of Liverpool's goals that they've been conceding. So I was kind of trying to go along those lines of saying, look, you've had all this extra time on the training pitch. Maybe now they've had more time to bed in. They're going to be a little bit better going forward. Where Slot decided to go down the running stats angle and say that we are fitter and as intense as the most intense team in the Premier League. It was the most intense match that was played all weekend, and say, look, hey, we are ready. We don't need any more time. We're ready. Which again, I thought was fascinating, because it didn't quite answer my question, but it did show what he is wanted to put out there to the world, that his team are ready for an intense battle. And make no mistake, that's exactly what Monday night at St James's Park is going to be. So that's probably a good thing that he wanted to let everybody know exactly that. Now, the second part of my question, in terms of the goals after substitutions, that was more about organisation. And again, it wasn't really so much of a criticism, more of just an observation that maybe when you have so many new players in the squad, getting used to the way the Slot delivers his messages, whether it's on the sidelines or before games or even at half-time, that time it takes when you're bringing on 2 players and other players are changing positions, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get set and ready than it would do later in the season. And those were things that Bournemouth and Crystal Palace were able to take advantage of. However, again, that's not entirely how Slot saw it. He didn't really answer about that part. He used it as an opportunity to explain exactly why he made those substitutions. And again, this was some criticism that he'd had previously, which he mentioned, the fact that some people didn't understand why he took off X player and why he brought on Y player at certain times. And it's interesting to note exactly how acutely all of these players' fitnesses are being managed. You mentioned some players that aren't quite at the level of other players, and someone like Ekitike, who obviously came in during pre-season, hasn't had the length of time with the team as some of the others, so that was the reason why he was taken off. We've seen McAllister have his issues over the course of the last few months, and so he was being managed as well. And that even though it looks like more than last season, everybody's at the same level through pre-season, there are still different things you have to do with different players. And this is all part of the plan for Arne Slot, and all part of exactly why he's been so good, usually, at keeping his players fit. Now, to go back to the beginning, obviously we've got 2 right-backs currently out injured, but that can only really be a luck thing. You can do as much as you can, and you can't be foolproof in terms of stopping injury, but it really goes to show exactly how detailed Liverpool are in it. And of course, he did have to let me know that they scored after substitutions as well. So it's not just bad things that happen after substitutions. And it really did make me giggle inside the way the look he gave after that, the kind of like, ha, but you didn't think about that, huh? Which kind of warmed my heart, because it kind of shows that, you know, we are in a little bit of a jousting match between me and him, or at least that's the way he seems to see it. For me, I'm just happy when he answers my questions and he gives us information that we didn't know previously. And that means I get to pass that information on to all of you. And there we have it, another press conference review in the can. I'm still hoping to catch up with my friend Gio to talk about the other Gio. Slot mentioned him as well, but we'll have to wait and see exactly how much he's going to be involved over the next coming weeks. I suspect it will be the other side of the international break before he gets playing, because he's only just arrived, and as I've just mentioned, you need to get up to speed with this Liverpool team and with this league. So I hope to find out a little bit more about Gio Leone from my good friend Gio, and hopefully bring that information to all of you, so hold out for that. There's going to be some more Anfield Wrap goodness. I've started a new show with Rob Goodman, as I'm sure some of you have seen, the Rob and Mo show, which has been taking off. So if you haven't seen that, go over to the Anfield Wrap YouTube page and watch that. Go over to the Late Challenge podcast YouTube page and watch the latest show I do with Gareth Roberts. So Rob and Robbo. I don't know if I'm getting a complex, but no. That's also been a great show. We did a really good one this week. Go out there and check it out. I told you about my This Is Anfield column last week. Well, it's still relevant because the ESAC stuff is still going on. So if you are interested in what it really is like inside a dressing room when a player decides he wants to leave and the club don't want to let him leave, go over there and read that. And for everyone else, wait for my next match report on Substack, and wait for my next one of these on YouTube. Don't worry, it won't be long. See you soon.